Hi there, my name is Jay with CompuMatter and also with ServerMatter, and the purpose of this video is to teach you and my future self how to restore files that were previously backed up by your Windows client on the network. So the typical scenario will be you're using Burp backup. Now this is the Burp backup by Graham Keeling. If there is another Burp suite out there, it's got nothing to do with that. And we've got that running on the server. We've got Windows clients or other clients on the network, but in this case, we have a Windows client who's called us and said, our file is corrupt, we need to restore from a backup. And we need to walk you and us through that program so in the future we can make that happen. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, I'm going to bring our server up on the left side. A couple things I want to point out here. The way it works is there needs to be a file called restore. Specifically, it must be named restore and it lives on your server. And that file named restore needs to live within the directory that your client's data is being backed up to. In our case, we're using a virtual machine that we've named VM1, and that's where it's getting backed up to. We're not going to get into how the storage area is selected because that's part of the backup process. That's already somewhere on your server. But your client name will be this, and that's where you need to create a file name restore. Now, once the restore is completed, it's important to know that the file that you created here will vaporize. They're going to remove it, and that's to be expected so that it's not constantly restored, right? They restore it, then the client does something with it, edits the data. You don't want the original restored again. So it deletes the folder. For that reason, we recommend you create a file called restore example, get it the way you want it to, then copy it to restore. Then when you test it and it removes, you'll still have your original. So let's go ahead. In our case, we're going to go straight to the restore directory because we've already done that. Okay, let's start off with these two things. These are variables. When your client calls you and says they're missing data, it may be data from yesterday, it may be data from 3 weeks ago. So you're going to need to isolate what backup number the data they want is actually in. And that'll be a conversation, based on the dates and that sort of thing. But let me show you how you can quickly isolate at least what backup the data they want is in. Now let's talk about the data they want. That's this. In this case, they've said our documents folder is hosed. We need to get our old ones restored, right? It could be anything that they've talked about that you're going to put in that field. But this is what we need to find, and we need to find what backup number contains it. So let's enter in this command, which is going to give us a list of all backups that contain C uses my PC documents. This is going to take a little while, probably about 30 to 60 seconds to go through all your backups. Okay, so how long it takes is going to be dependent on how large a data set that you have. In our case, our data set's not that large, and it still took about 45 seconds for it to look at every backup and see what had it in it. And we can see backup number 151 has it, and so on, all the way up to our original backup. So all our backups have it. So at this point, it's up to the customer to tell us which date range that they need. So let's take a look at this one that happened on 5/3, 5/3, 5/4, and so on. So we're going to use one of these as an example. Let's use number 92 as an example. So now we're going to edit that file again. We're going to change that to number 92. That'll be the version. They've overwritten data since then. They may want an older version. All that's got to be figured out. It's variable. Now let's talk about the restore prefix. That is you dictating what directory on that client this restored file ends up in. Now, I could just restore it back to the original location, but I would much rather restore it to a predictable other location that doesn't potentially overwrite anything that they have that might be of value. For instance, they may be interested in one or two files and you restore the whole My Documents folder. All of a sudden they have new problems they didn't realize they were going to have. So put it in a separate place, much safer bet. Now let's talk a little bit about the client's machine and what they have to have in place. We're assuming the Burp Backup program has been installed because they wouldn't be able to back up if they didn't have it. And in that Burp Backup, you will find a Burp CONF file found in Program Files Burp directory, as this one is. And we're looking for this particular directory right here. Two things really. The server can restore needs to be set to 1, or we won't be able to control that from our side if we need to. But that's not necessary for this, I'll tell you. It can be 0 here, because in this example, we're actually going to be restoring it in an automated way from the client side. But let's talk about the restore prefix. At present, it says C:/ or / toast. If I have a C:/ on the client's configuration file, I cannot have a C:/ on the server configuration file. That will result in a failure because you can't have two. It's got to pick a directory structure, and it can't have two directory structures, two drive letters in the same string. So it's got to be one or the other. And so in this case, if we use C toast as an example, we use SM restored files as the example over there, it's going to create the C toast in the Windows client first, and then it's going to create another folder within it called SM restored files. I'm going to open up this virtual machine for a minute, our Windows client, and we're going to take a look at the scheduler for just a second. Now this Burp cron job, that came when you installed the server environment, the client's Burp software, and by default it runs every 20 minutes. I've got this one to run every hour. We could wait until the server runs the very next time, in which case it will see that restore file, it will run it, it will delete it, and presumably have restored the files unless there's a failure of some kind. But another way that we can do this and accelerate the process is by going to the Burp bin directory, Program Files Burp bin, and just getting a listing of directories, because any communication with the server will cause the server to look for that restore file and run the restore. Before I do that, I'm going to copy that restore to our restore example so I don't have to do the same thing twice. Now, well, actually, on that note, as long as I remain inside the restore file, I can resave it, and even though it was deleted, it will be saved again. Okay, let's run that. Okay, restore confirmed. Let's take a look at the C directory. We have indeed a directory called toast. You can see the SM restored, and this is actually a previous test. You can see the date is 306. Let's get that out of there. Okay, this is the one that counts. It doesn't, in Windows won't allow it to use a C:, so it uses a C underscore. That lets us know that's the drive letter that it was originally in, and users and my PC and documents and so on. And those are the files we expect to see. So all that went perfectly. And remember, that same thing would have happened automatically on a cron job if we chose not to manually make it happen right now. Now let's change this up just a little bit. On the server side, instead of being the child directory, which it is right now, we're going to make it control where the files actually end up going. And we're going to put the drive letter in front of it. And we're going to come over to the Windows side, and we are going to just put a simple / in there. It has been my experience that if you're controlling the drive letter from the server side, you control it all. If you put anything else in the restore prefix on the client side, not just a drive letter, but any directory at all, it fails the process and it simply doesn't succeed. If you put anything other than a / in there, the whole thing fails. So we're going to go ahead and go with the C:/ SM restored files. I could put any series of directories after that. It would work. It's been tested. I'll save it. I'll come back over to the virtual machine. I have deleted any previous references here. We'll go ahead and run it. which basically, again, it's just listing. It's looking at the drive letter. Now, I have no idea why it has toast in there. It's not what I expected to see, so maybe I didn't save this. That'll do it. So in that case, what it did is it created an empty directory, and I've experienced that before. It created an empty directory called toast. What I put on the server side doesn't show up at all, because as you see, this error on the screen could not make directory with 2 drive letters in it. So just as well we did that. Okay, so let's clear that out. Take 2, and we expect success. And you can see SM restored files was created. We can see it right here. There's a drive letter. Well, I don't know why. Being used by another process. Oh, it actually is being used by another process. SM restored files is still working. Okay, I'm not sure what the delay was there, but we do have our restore. We only had a couple files and documents. And I actually had to Control-C out of that one off camera. But I did Control-C. It said restore finished. All the files are there. So that is the first time that's ever happened. If I do that again, let's see what happens. You see the restore file is gone. Okay, it's put back in place. Everything else is the same. I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm also going to start a log file so I can see what it says. And I'm just grepping the syslog with the word burp in there, and we'll start the process. There you go. Took a minute for the... that's the way it's supposed to work. So I don't know what that hang-up was, but it finished, and we have our files. Okay, so in the past, I've shown you where the configuration file, be it on the server side or the client side, only one of them can have a drive letter. And depending on which one does, the other one you need to enter the configs a little bit differently. But let's take a case where you didn't enter in any drive letters. That's a possibility. If you enter one, it needs to be on one side or the other. But if you don't enter one, the other rule is that one of them has to be root, has to be listed as just a /. Then either one can control the directory name that's going to be created, and that directory name will be put in the client's burp bin folder. So let me give you an example. I've got a directory called toast that I'm saying I want created on the client side. I'm leaving the server side at root, and I will go in and create a new a new restoration, actually a list, which is going to generate a restoration. You can see in the burp bin folder there are no folders there right now. Okay, shows that it's complete, and it shows that it in fact put it in the burp bin toast folder. So that's another way that you can do it. And that's it. That's how you can restore your data from your burp backup that exists on your server environment directly to the Windows client. I'm sure it's something similar to that if it's an Apple client or if it's a Linux client. We'll get into that in another video, but I hope this one helps you. If you like to see videos like this, be sure to like and subscribe. If you subscribe, you'll be on the early list to be notified when they come out. Thanks very much for watching. Bye-bye.